Welcome again, and let me introduce you first to David Home, CEO and founder of Exigent Group. David is a qualified KPMG ACA. David provides commercial direction to Exigent's global client base. Having provided financial due diligence and been a buyer of due diligence as a director of a private equity fund, gives him a unique insight into growth and efficiency opportunities for clients. Before Exigent, David has worked in the due diligence team at KPMG and has been part of multidisciplinary diligence teams overseeing over 500 million worth of deals in less than a decade. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Gordon. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm down in cloudy Australia. So thank you for introducing me, and I'd just like to introduce the star of the show, which is Mick Sheehy. His bio is on the screen, but I think the interesting thing about Mick joining us today is the fact that not that he's really been in Telstra for 12 years, I think, but you've completed over sort of 100 transactions sort of in that time, in a range of different geographies. So sort of one of the interesting things about that, Mick, for the audience's sake, I think, is the range of values of those transactions. So it's not just been the big deals, has it, and in different spaces.
No, that's right, David. So we and certainly in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, we became increasingly sort of active in M&A. Over the time that I've been there, it's been about a dozen years. You're quite right. We've done 100+ transactions, and ranging from several million to several billion at the top end. Being in a corporate, they've always been strategic decisions, strategic investments, rather as opposed to financial. But probably what's changed a little bit in recent years is that we set up a venture capital sort of outfit, Telstra Ventures, which has meant that so that was set up maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it was at that point that we we first contemplated taking minority investments, and that's actually what was probably one of the biggest reasons why our pipeline suddenly grew, because it's opened us up to a lot of opportunities that previously we wouldn't look at, because before that it had to be a majority stake. Also, I guess being here that sort of length of time, the strategy changes. So with strategy changing, it means that some of the things that made sense no longer made sense, which has made my life busy doing a lot of divesting a lot of the stuff that I bought when I first joined the company. So it's been a really active period, and we've been fortunate. I've certainly been fortunate to see both ends of the spectrum, buying and selling, and big and small, and a sort of wide variety of industries.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating thing, because you've also done it across Australia, Asia, and the US. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. So, look, most of our acquisitions and our activity has been in Australia and Asia. Because we have such a big market share in Australia, we're actually prevented from doing a lot of sort of acquisitions close to the core in Australia, because the ACCC likes to get involved. So it's meant that we've had to have quite an offshore focus, and hence Asia has been a key sort of jurisdiction or key geography for us to focus on. But certainly we've also been quite active in the US and in Europe to a limited extent as well.
Yeah, I think the audience is going to find that sort of as we go through the presentation experience really valuable. So maybe we could just very quickly look at the agenda, and we will try and keep ourselves on track rather than waffle too much. So we sent out prior to this morning a survey, which we'll just come on to in a minute, really to gauge people's thoughts, some simple thoughts about what they think of the diligence process. The key thing for us, I guess, today is to concentrate on where the value lies in diligence, rather than, I think, quite often, and Mick, you'll have a comment on this, I'm sure, it's been a sort of focus on risk rather than opportunity. And then finally, and we'll try and get to the blue circle as quickly as we can, and curb our enthusiasm on the way, to make sure that the audience gets one or two sort of takeaways that they can really action. So I know we've had this discussion before, in a more social environment, but value or risk, Mick, what's your what do you think it's changed over the last 12 years, and do you think it will change over the next 3?
So I think it's actually been fairly stable over most of my time, but certainly about sort of maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we started having a conversation about the beautiful due diligence reports that get produced there. They're wonderfully thorough, typically very large, very good looking documents that take a lot of time and money to produce, but often don't get, after the deal is done, they get put away in a drawer and not really used again. The executive summary tends to be maybe flipped through a bit, but I think that we've been, the discussions more recently have been about how do we actually make this a more effective process, how do we get, as you say, more value out of the due diligence, and how do we make it more sort of forward-looking rather than just a point-in-time exercise. And I think that will that discussion is ongoing. I think we're starting to see some change, and I think that we'll see more and more change in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, there's a small confession of my own. I think in the 100+ deals that I've been a part of or been a principal on, I'm not sure I've ever read a diligence report all the way through, I have to say. And quite often, when please don't tell my former employers, but what's interesting about that is, same as you guys, as a financial investor, we were selling everything that we bought in a time frame of 3 to 5 years, and it wouldn't be a surprise to find that the diligence report on the way out read pretty similarly to the one on the way in.
Yep, yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all, and I think so often they are written with the perspective of what can go wrong, and have we basically identified that problem when we bought the business? So it's almost done as a sort of what's another word for covering your behind exercise rather than looking at what value we can create. So I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting point, just to sort of draw on that for a second. There's a difference, and I think just being, again, sort of first tip which we talked about the other day is sort of what could go wrong is different to what's likely to go wrong. And I think you said that in your reports you're starting to adopt a sort of traffic light system. Is that right? Is that the way to describe it?
Yeah. So we absolutely sort of weight the risks, and but again. There's a big difference, I think, between focusing on the major risks and reporting on every risk, and I think that's still a journey we're going on.
Yeah. So maybe we'll just look at the first sort of survey results. So, I mean, a wide geographic spread there, pretty healthy spread across multiple jurisdictions. Obviously. Heavy concentration in Australia, Mick. I think it probably reflects your kind of Telstra's reputation and your reputation in the marketplace. So interesting to see that a good healthy chunk are not general counsel that have responded to the survey. Maybe you could just briefly kind of comment, Mick, on the pressures that you're seeing. I mean, is this a change that a broader range of C-suite are involved in the diligence process or interested in the output, and are their perspectives different? I mean, do you think that's changed, or do you see it changing?
I think it's I think it's starting to change. I think that and I actually do also think it's driven mainly by legal, but I think legal is under more and more pressure to demonstrate the value it can bring to the table. And I think that general counsel and M&A lawyers are starting to realise that in demonstrating their value, like utilizing the DD exercise to show how this is not just a legal risk exercise is starting to come into conversation, and ultimately the business pays for the due diligence as well. So I think that as pressure continues to mount on legal costs, the business is wanting to make sure, or is starting to be interested in what gets produced as part of that legal exercise.
Right. And maybe, Gordon, if we look at the next slide there, I think this is quite a striking slide that everyone thinks that there's value in it somewhere, but nobody wants to pay much for it. Is maybe the conclusion. I mean, that's a pretty stark stat, isn't it? That only 17% think it's value for money. Mm-hmm. That must mean there's only two conclusions from that as an accountant, which is either it's too expensive or you're not seeing a return on that. What do you think of that as a kind of? What do you think of that stat, and what do you think of that observation?
So I think that's reflective of the fact that, everyone, we all know we have to do the due diligence exercise, otherwise we go in blindly. So nobody's questioning that. But to the point that we made before, the reports are being put in a drawer and only pulled out if something goes wrong. And that is I think that probably reflects why it's such a low percentage. I think it's good value for money. I think that if the exercise can be forward-looking, and we like to think about creating a diligence report that is essentially an instruction manual for the company,
right?
That will be a living, breathing document a living, breathing data set or instruction manual, as I said, would that then suddenly you are moving from a sort of a tick the box exercise that doesn't get looked at again to something that actually becomes really valuable for the company as you move forward.
Yeah. Good. If we just move on to the next slide, because I want to go a bit further into that observation, Mick, and talk about that idea of this it being a company manual. And that must mean it's a very different looking kind of document, firstly, I guess. And you, I think, Telstra, you have a kind of a methodology of doing post-deal integration as well. And that takes it away from being a grudge purchase that you forget about into something that makes it valuable going forward. Just interestingly, though, how easy is it to maintain that kind of living, breathing document, and when does it die, kind of thing? Because at some point it has a sort of shelf life in a sense.
So well, it's a great question. I don't think that we've got that we've necessarily solved or got it perfect. But to the point you made before, we have in the last few years built an acquisition integration team, and I think that was a really important step, because we now have a group of people that are responsible for looking at the diligence exercise, taking the learnings, and then building them out as we move forward with post completion, and they are bringing that document to life. I suspect that when their job is done, it's harder to keep the value of that diligence exercise. So I think we've still got a bit of work to do to work out how you continue to make it live beyond the engagement of our sort of acquisition integration team.
Well, I guess one of the things that we would recommend as well is taking the data that you get in that report and integrating it into your system. So contract management would be a perfect example. And I think one of the things that we like to do with our clients, obviously you're one of our clients, but I think one of the things that is quite a useful thing is when you're doing the diligence is to tag those documents so that you can easily integrate them within your internal systems. I think there's more to be done in that area.
I think there is a lot more to be done. I think it's kind of quite almost frustrating that sometimes you can get these great insights when you do the diligence, and then they just get left behind. You don't. The company almost gets essentially run the same way that it was before you bought it, whereas you should be leveraging those insights. So having an integration team, great, but if you can incorporate it into your systems as well, so that they can really come to life, I think that's there's real value in that.
Yeah, one of the things that we've done with various of our clients is looked at, as part of the diligence, is look at possible kind of synergies that you can do post deal. So so they go to the kind of heart of what the value is. So are we actually going to get value out of this by leveraging the synergies? But just a very quick question. That we need to keep moving along so we get to the blue circle. Is just quickly, if you're a smaller company than Telstra and you don't have the resources for an integration team, have you got any recommendations for people on this call that might not have your sort of level of resources?
Yeah, I think that well, certainly what we've learnt over time is that it's the more sort of you fragment the jobs or the exercise of an acquisition and silo it, the less likely you're going to be able to use the benefits that you learn along the way. So, and what I mean by that is, we learned that having an M&A team come and do the diligence, do the transaction, then hand it off to the business, and then move on to the next one. That's the best way to lose a lot of the learnings. So it's been really important for us to have the various players be involved in the overall process as early as possible, and earlier than you would think. And so for a smaller organisation, I think that the trick is to make sure that you have continuity of people involved in the process, in the acquisition and post-acquisition, and you don't necessarily need to have a specialist acquisition integration team, but just looking for that continuity, I think, is probably the key.
And that value comes from internal rather than external resources, basically. Is that a fair observation? I think I haven't seen external law firms particularly capable of helping with that, because you're left holding the baby, right?
Absolutely. I think that the moment you rely on too much on externals, then you'll end up in that fragmentation sort of world that I mentioned before, where you do not have continuity of knowledge and insight.
Yeah. So, Gordon, I think we have a poll coming up. Is this where I hand back to you, Gordon, or? There we go. So there's a poll here which has opened. I think it's fairly straightforward to tick two of your kind of thoughts here. I think that we're allowed to pick two. And this speaks to some of those things that we've been talking about. Where is the most value? Is it really risk mitigation? Is it to help drive down the price? Because that's really what we're talking about when it comes to negotiation. Is it, how many people really see the long-term commercial gains that you're alluding to in the legal space? I think, and how much during that process is about post-deal sort of integration. So people have got a couple of minutes to take a quick look at that and have a think. My sense, Mick, interested in your view, is that the last two are gaining traction. The previous two are the historical priorities. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, the first two are the sort of point in time. Did we do a good deal or not? The companies are not necessarily interested in whether or not you did a good deal. They're certainly, shareholders and stakeholders are far more interested in whether not over time it proves to be a good deal. And so the last two are all about that. And our deal team now is very focused on the post-implementation review, and which we will do at certain at regular points after the deal. So we do a 1 month and a 100-day, and then a 2-year, and those last 2 points will be will certainly go to whether or not it will also contribute certainly to whether or not it's successful in the long term.
Here's a sort of more radical question then, which I've just thought up. But of the deals that didn't go so well, and we've all had them, you know, are there any that you could put down to the quality of legal due diligence or otherwise?
So the ones that have gone spectacularly wrong have. I'm not sure. So I'm not sure I'd strictly call it legal due diligence, but certainly diligence. So you know, we were investing with the wrong people, in the wrong, particularly in Asia. So we had a suite of Asian deals, and some of our very, very best negotiated deals, the ones where we had the strongest rights, were the deals that didn't go so well, and yet compared to some of the early ones where we actually had less strong rights, which were spectacularly successful. It's not saying that it was the lesson learnt was to have less strong rights, but the diligence was should have told us that we were not necessarily investing with the. Yeah. Well, so the risk was a little different so between those companies, because we hadn't really paid enough attention to the diligence.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the deals that I did that didn't go so well, and you'd say Wolf Gollum, you know, probably most of it came down. Well, I can't think of anywhere where legal diligence strictly was the issue. I think probably management diligence was a much bigger issue than. I think we're ready for the results, Steve, if we can do that. Yes, it's been much more about the commercials and the management. So I think this kind of that almost tells us we're right, Mick. So you know, I think that's unsurprising, really. But I think that's the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. What an amazing opportunity.
and you know, very few of the external law firms that we deal with see it that way. They see the first two as the keys, really. So maybe we can just go and move on to the next sort of survey result. If we go to that, we seem to have gone backwards. There we go. So Mick, you've been a vendor, and you know, selling efficiently is just as important as kind of as buying. You know, what are your kind of, you know, in order to level that playing field and make, you know, get the best value when you're selling, what techniques do you, Telstra, apply to sort of optimize that? We've given some suggestions here, but you know, you guys are doing a lot more of this stuff than pretty much anyone else in the marketplace in Australia. So what tools have you found useful?
So I think we think about when we're selling, we think about the information we're providing in sort of with two lenses. One, how you present information about your company, I think, is actually a reflection on your company, and so we certainly think it's important to be, you know, to have that information as organised and easy to read and digest as possible. I think that's the starting point is it's just a reflection on the quality of the company that you're selling. But then two, and especially when you've got a competitive bidding situation, the more that you can remove the sort of exercise of a bidder having to sort of fill in the gaps for themselves, then the more likely that all the bidders are working off the same starting point.
And do you take a strategy? I mean, certainly when I was buying businesses, it was always the actual what was in there was one thing, but the how comprehensive the information was and how it was presented was a big red flag if it was disorganised, and because you knew that the process was going to drag on. You know, if you're looking, say, make a I don't know, 30 to 40 million disposal, give or take, you know, I know it's a hard question, but you know, do you have a thumbnail estimate of how much time you'd spend organising that data, or does it, you know, how much time do you allocate to that period of the deal? Do you think it cuts down the fees going forward after you've selected a bidder?
Yeah, so we do. So I think that there's always a temptation when you decide to sell something to open up a data room, you know, as early as possible. And I do like to think that we have some. We certainly, there have been, you know, a number of examples where we've tried to be quite disciplined about what state that data room needs to be in before we open it up. There are a number of, you know, many instances where we've spent a lot of time doing preparing contract summaries and really trying to make it as easy a process as possible for our bidders to understand the real sort of value and, you know, risk items in a company, and you know, that preparation, it takes time, and you know, we've spent, you know, certainly offhand, you know, a month or two getting a company up to scratch certainly for the bigger ones.
Do you use external people? That was purely an internal task. And second part of the question is, if you haven't got those resources that you have within your sort of business, who would you turn to help you with that? I hope you say
Exigent. Yeah. Well, no,
you've got to get plugged in somewhere.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely a mix. So it'll be you have to start internally. That's where all the data comes from, and we do. You know, we will use our the law firm that we've appointed, and to help in some ways, but actually they actually probably have their more limited role in terms of data room preparation. We'll certainly use yourselves for things such as contract summaries. That's been a really effective way of getting those materials together. But it's a mix, and I think you've got to look at what the work needs to be done and who's the most appropriate party to do it.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. Just worth comment on that. You've obviously evolved the model in terms of acquisitions and disposals with using Gilbert and Tobin as well as ourselves. And maybe if we kick on to the next part, the next survey, and we could maybe click on to the next slide anyway. But while we're doing that, Mick, kind of just some thoughts on how that joint delivery model is kind of what's been good and what's been less good. You know, what's made it successful for you guys in that sense.
Okay, so when we first did it, for the audience, you know, the model was us using our one of our sort of trusted law firms. In that case, the first time that we did this was with Gilbert and Tobin, and but we had a hunch that a lot of the DD exercise could be done differently and done more effectively and efficiently, and so we wanted to try using Exigent for that exercise. But what was really important was that it was not a sort of siloed approach. We'd use, Exigent would be responsible for this part, and Gilbert and Tobin for the other part, and for us it was really important that we're all in it together. We wanted to be relatively seamless. To that end, we asked Gilbert and Tobin to engage Exigent, but at the same time we also wanted to have complete sort of transparency on the work that Exigent did, the fees that were charged, and so that Exigent was more or less, even though they were engaged by Gilbert and Tobin, treating us as as if it was a direct engagement.
Yeah, I mean, certainly kind of that engagement with, I mean, we've done this in various jurisdictions around the world, and I would, there's a plug for Gilbert and Tobin, I don't know if they're on the line, but certainly the ease of working with those guys has been a key success factor, and they've been actually really brilliant in this process. So we've got another poll open, which is now sort of quickly moving on to tech. Mick, have you, there's a lot of talk in the marketplace around kind of technology, and what's your, have you had any experience of it to date, or not?
No, sorry. Well, technology in due diligence.
Yeah.
I think less so. I mean, we're seeing technology changing a lot of the way in which we're working. We increasingly using more and more automated sort of workflow programs for simple documentation, etc. In terms of diligence, not yet, but I think that there's a lot of interesting discussion going on about it, and I certainly think it's going to be to have an increasing role. I think with tech, it's always got to be about the return on investment. Why it can't just be that it's a quicker or a nicer way of working. It has to be about what additional value I'm going to get from investing in the new tech. But I think that from our perspective, there's this is a relatively sort of green field in terms of tech opportunities and diligence.
Yeah, I mean, as you probably know, we did a deal with a kind of contract discovery business in Chicago. I mean, our observation right now is these are useful tools, but they're not the ultimate solution, and are unlikely to be that in the next kind of 2 to 3 years. I mean, we tested pretty much everything in the marketplace, and they came out on top because it was the easiest thing for our people to work with, quite honestly. Yeah. The others we found, our guys sort of struggled to be easily trained on it, and then the QA kind of cancelled out some of the benefits. Not so much when you've got very simple stuff, 10 points from a contract or 10 points from a contract summary. It actually is incredibly useful. When you want to apply it in a more complex area, it does require a lot more kind of human intervention, I think. But I think this poll's really interesting because I think it's spot on. I think speed is part of that. You can see that accuracy is not really top of that kind of poll list. Any kind of observations on that?
I think that's right. We're not. I think we're not saying that tech's necessarily going to do a better job than a human, but it should be faster and it should be far more efficient and effective. So I'm not surprised by that poll result.
I think it's spot on. I think most of the markets where you are, which is kind of, it's interesting, it's a pregnant pause, you might call it. Well, how do we actually practically kind of apply it now and get to those sort of benefits?
But I do think that it's pretty low on the post-deal integration. I think that's where there's, again, real opportunity.
Absolutely.
The ability for technology to be able to tell you down the track as you're encountering a particular issue with your business, or there's a particular opportunity arises, and it's the ability for technology to tell you something that you actually learned in diligence that you'd forgotten about is a real opportunity.
Yeah, you can use tech in different ways as well. You can use things like Smartsheet as well for sort of combined diligence. I think with Lex Predict, one of the things we like is to be able to auto tag information during diligence, so it's easier for you to put into your database post-deal. Yeah. And that's otherwise it becomes two exercises: diligence, then post-deal. You can actually do some interesting stuff as we go through the diligence process. I'm aware of time, so we should just flick on to the next slide, Gordon, and the one after that, I think. So I think just getting down to the nitty-gritty of value in terms of numbers, really going, cost reduction in diligence. You've achieved that with your joint delivery model, but this yellow circle, I think, is where it's all at. If your CFO says to you, "Well, tell me how much it's going to make me," do you think this is actually our estimate from the work that we've done with various clients and from our background in contract management and how much value you can get from running those contracts more effectively? Do you feel free to disagree, Mick? I know you will, but do you think 2 to 4% is a fair estimate of what you might gain from running, say, an acquisitions contract more effectively by doing diligence more efficiently?
There has to be a there has to be an increased efficiency or value, and so 2 to 4% doesn't sound unreasonable at all. I think that it's interesting. I don't think we're there yet, in that the CFO or the CEO is demanding that the diligence provides that value. But the CFO and CEO are demanding is that legal's budget keeps being reduced year on year, and I think that that's been happening since the GFC, and I think that as a legal function, we're now realising that that's just going to continue unless we can show that we demonstrate value. And I think that the imperative now is actually on the legal group for its own sort of sounds a bit drastic, but survival, to show that it does more than mitigate risk. It can actually create value, and that is where we're increasingly having more and more conversations internally as a legal function.
Right. So I think that's spot on. I think if you think that better contract management might deliver 6%, and those are fairly kind of well endorsed industry numbers, and you're buying an acquisition with an idea of opportunity, then that yellow circle shapes the priorities within the diligence process away. It may shift it more to the bottom two than the first two, but you kind of have to buy into the idea that you're going to make more money by buying it than you are by leaving it on its own.
Absolutely, and that's a pretty foreign concept for a legal function. A legal function is not used to being able to sort of have conversations about what value it's going to create. It's historically been about what risk it's going to mitigate.
And are you going to have that conversation, Mick, in your next deal? Or?
Well, we're already having it. We're having it. No one's listening to us yet because they're not used to lawyers talking about value creation.
You can't do numbers.
Yeah.
So we're on to the blue circle. If we could just skip onto in your next deal and sort of next steps. Interestingly, Mick, you've done your numbers on how you've changed your process already. What are you we've put in? You can take 25% of your your next deal. You've run the numbers on how you've done it? Is 25% a reasonable estimate?
Yeah, we felt on the diligence exercise. So you've got to separate the diligence from the I guess the sort of contract negotiation, etc. But on the diligence exercise, we felt that our numbers that we ran was around about 30%. So it was definitely far more cost effective to use the model that we did with Gilbert and Tobin and yourselves, and we've done that with our other law firms as well. And so it was a really positive exercise.
So is that 30% of the diligence, or 30% of the deal cost?
No, it was of the diligence. So, that's a chunky number.
Yeah. What percentage typically do you think diligence is of your deal?
Probably about half.
Yeah. So you're talking that 25% feels kind of 20% feels about right mathematically.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly material, particularly when you add it up over a number of deals. And our view was that it's still relatively new, and over time you'll get more and more efficient. So that number should increase.
Yeah. Gordon, if we could just skip to the beyond due diligence slide, I think it's 2 on. Oh, there's Nicola. She wanted to make an appearance. But I want to just nip onto the next slide. We'll circulate this deck in due course. Nicola's looking very bright on there, I would say.
Indeed.
But this is actually a piece of work which we shared with you, Mick, that we did where we actually reviewed $2 billion deal size worth of deal costs. And this is quite a busy slide, so people may take a bit of time to look at this and consider how, by using a different model, different resources, whether that's internal or external or alternative providers, how you might be able to reduce those costs. And so there's Diligence, of course, which is sort of column 2, but then if you look at the last 2 research and what's particularly in the US, this is a North American study, was other matters. And what was quite staggering to us when we looked at this massive data was how much time was put into indescribable things called other matters. Is that a feature of the Australian market, and do you think that there are opportunities to change more outside the deal process, outside the diligence process?
Yeah, so I mean, our focus has been on diligence, there's no question, but we also, it's still relatively new for us, and we needed to make a start somewhere. So I think the good thing is we've done it. We operated off a hunch. We've done it. We got some results. Really, most importantly, we're able to measure them. I think that you can never underestimate the importance of having data to actually validate or not whether changing the way in which you've done something is a good idea or not. We've now can sort of almost bank that as a better way of doing things, and then look for the next opportunity. So I think that we will look at we'll continue to look at other areas such as those and others in terms of, and I think it's just it's critically important to always be, particularly with tech and legal tech becoming more and more part of the conversation, to be constantly challenging yourself on the way in which you've traditionally done things, because I think that it is going to, the way in which we operate is going to continue to change quite quickly over time.
And sort of before we hand back to Gordon and see if there are any sort of questions, I think we are kind of running low on time, but just before we do that, if for the audience's benefit, three things that you would do tomorrow that you've either found works or you want to do. Can you think of the top 3 in sort of top of your mind?
So I'm probably going to repeat myself a bit here, but as I said, don't ever underestimate the importance of data. I think that measuring, so often we operate on sort of hunches and gut feels, and but they're very hard to prove whether those if that's the way you're operating, whether they're good decisions or not. And I think that being able to measure your baseline and measure what happened, where you get to afterwards is critically important. So I think that so that's probably one. Number 2, we are very aware that technology is changing the way in which we operate. I think we're also very cautious about sort of locking ourselves into any particular technology at the moment. We're trying to get a really good understanding of what our real needs are, what is going to deliver the most value, and it's easier also to commit to technology in a small way or on an isolated example, and sort of dip your toes in the water, which we are doing. For instance, with we've got we launched an instant NDA late last year, and so that's not sort of betting the bank. So but I think we'll be constantly looking at technology, and 3, as I said before, I think always being open to challenging the way in which we've worked. So they're sort of more motherhood, David. If you wanted something more specific, I haven't got it for you, but that's sort of the mindset, I guess, is that we need to continue to have.
Yeah, no, I think that's that's a massive step on in terms of just what I think. To sum it up, it's like there's a lot of opportunity out there, and one of the things that we're doing is really helping people identify how to best kind of leverage those, because I think it is hard if you're, particularly if you're a 4 or 5 person legal team. It's very hard to get your arms around what's out there. You can't kind of catch every snowflake basically, and nor should you. It's about trying to find the people that can help you identify how to best leverage what's out there.
Totally. So for the smaller legal departments, my biggest tip would be to speak to the problems that you're trying to solve are not isolated to your organisation. Everybody's trying to solve the same problems. There's enormous benefit in collaboration and sharing learnings, and that's something that we only learnt really relatively recently. But the way in which we even the last 12 months now engaged with just talking to the other legal departments in other companies here in Australia, in the US in particular, we've ramped that up enormously, and it's amazing how willing everybody is to share. Legal departments, even in companies that compete with each other, the legal departments don't compete with each other. Yeah. So there's an enormous opportunity, and that would be my #1 tip for a small legal department.
We'll certainly be helping with that with some of our favoured clients. Gordon, I think we've gone slightly over, but hopefully not too bad. Can I pass this back to you now?
Yes, thank you, David. Thank you, Mick. Just a couple of questions if we have a couple of more minutes. First question is I believe it's for Mick, and it comes from Jeremy. How did the contract review output from the Gilbert and Tobin and Exigent combined due diligence get integrated into Telstra's contract management system?
Well, that's a very flattering question, because it didn't. I absolutely would love to be able to say that we integrated it into our contract management system, but that's still something that we're I guess working on. It's where we aspire to be, where we have we certainly all the output went into sort of a sort of living, breathing environment with our acquisition integration team, but our ability to systemize it, to put it into our systems and processes is still an opportunity that we haven't. We're not there yet, but it's work in progress, and I'd like to think that we'll be more sort of capable in that area as in the not too distant future.
There's one question for David. Can you give some examples of how data or info gathered in the due diligence process can help run the company or generate value in the future?
I can give you a specific example of that. I mean, we run a kind of contract insights program. It's from a piece of technology called Pentaho. And by doing diligence on commercial as well as legal terms and comparing them with, say, your existing portfolio, you will quickly find contract anomalies. So you might find in your target that the average payment terms are 60 days, and yet the Telstra group might be 40 days. So quite quickly in diligence, you can compare the two, run it through a business intelligence tool, and look at calculating what the possible impact is of changing contract policy. That's quite a big deal, and I think that's a real opportunity that legal has missed in the past, partly because those people have not extracted commercial terms in a way that allows them to run it through business intelligence or a Pentaho, what we call insights. That, in one instance alone, can generate really significant calculated value, where you can point to the gain of changing contract commercial terms, and that is actually not a complicated process. So firstly, you look at the anomalies within the portfolio and acquire a target. Second, you say, if we brought it in line with what we have, then this is the potential gain. So as one sort of piece alone of how to use data, that you can calculate that that gain without any real difficulty sort of whatsoever. So that to be honest, the majority of concentration in terms of value of acquisition is in that contract base, and being able to marshal that and visualize it, because that's part of BI, is a step on for diligence. Mick, is that something you've done before, or is that new?
No, it's new, but definitely of interest.
Gordon?
Yes, and if we have just time for one more quick question, please, and then we'll have to close. It could be for either one of you gentlemen. Have you found any tools or techniques that assist with post-deal integration?
Mick, I'll let you go first.
Look, I mean, this sort of goes back to the previous question around contract management systems. At the moment, our tools, in inverted commas, are really our integration team, and I think that it's an opportunity to be explored. And I think that a lot of the feedback we got on the polls today around the value of diligence, in post-acquisition and that being an opportunity, speaks to the fact that we need to invest more time and thought into it, but we don't have any tools as such today.
I think there are two parts. I sort of think about this far too much. I need to get out more, but I think there's a couple of things that I would say that are really quite good practical things. If you're reviewing a contract, which let's just say it costs $50 to review a contract in labour terms. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a marginal additional cost if you're fairly certain of doing the acquisition. Maybe even 5% on top of that 50 to be able to meta tag it to make it fully searchable post deal. If you tag it during the diligence process, either using humans or auto tagging, which is kind of all right, but it's not perfect, you will find that post integration piece really easy. Otherwise, you're starting again. And so the meta tagging, I think, is a really useful marginal additional cost, especially if you're saving money in the overall way you're doing diligence, to spend a bit more to increase the speed of post-deal integration by tagging those documents, all of them, then that makes post-integration from a systemic perspective much easier, I think. So some of the tools can do auto tagging for the simple stuff, but if you want to make it more complex and comprehensive, it's worth the additional investment while you're doing the diligence. Recognizing you're taking a risk that the deal doesn't happen, then that's wasted additional investment. But if it does, you're in good shape.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Mick. I think that's all the time we have for questions today. Any other questions that you can send to us? Please do. You have details on the screen here, and also through our website. We'll try to answer all your questions offline. Many thanks again for your time.
Thanks for everyone for attending, and thanks very much to Mick.
Thanks, everyone.